So we're trying an experiment in this last 45-minute round. My guest is Joel Gascoigne, the CEO and co-founder of the company Buffer, which we'll be talking about. Joel and I spent probably half an hour on Skype a year ago, and I had asked him to speak, and he came back and said, actually, I'd rather be interviewed. And I run a small podcast. I've never done a podcast live in front of an audience, so this is going to be a new experience for me. If you're interested, you can see my interview with like Adam Pisoni, Micah Rouse, several other people, Jenny Sauerklein in the audience, and who've been speakers. Just Google their name and my name, and it'll pop right up. But this is my first time conducting a live interview in front of an audience, so thank you for coming on, and thank you all for being here.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been an amazing couple of days. I've learned a lot, and it's a really incredible group of people that have come together here. So
they are, and you all are. Let's start just so actually, show of hands, who would say that they're very familiar with Buffer as a company? So maybe half the audience. And how many people have not heard of Buffer as a company? Okay, cool. Half of the audience.
My two teammates both put their hands up on the first round. So
okay, that's good.
That's good.
Okay, so with that in mind, what is this company that you founded and run?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Buffer is a social media management tool primarily for businesses and also for individuals, and we help people with scheduling, posting social media content to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and every network, and Instagram now, and then getting analytics on everything you share so that you can improve, your performance and know how everything's going. And that's kind of the product side. So we're a software as a service business model. So we have a free version, and then we have $10 a month, and 50% of our revenue comes from $10 a month customers, of which we have about 55,000 paying customers on the $10 a month. That's 50% of the revenue, and then the rest of the revenue is from people paying $50, $100, up to around about $500, and then a few on the more enterprise side. And that's the product and the service and the customer kind of offering. But it's interesting when I meet someone that knows about Buffer, half of the time they know about the product and the service, and half the time they know about our culture and the things we've done there. So we're also really known for our transparency. So the salaries are completely public information, so you can actually Google Buffer salaries and find a list of everyone in the company and their salary and the formula behind that and why they have that salary. And revenues, a lot of our numbers are completely public. And then we're also a fully remote, fully distributed team, so about 80 people right now. And we're across 5 different continents. And so there's these aspects as well that people often know us for. And so it's kind of really interesting how there's that kind of those two sides there.
Nice. And how many people is the company now?
80. So 80.
When did you and your co-founder start Buffer?
So started, it's coming up to almost 6 years now, so about 6 years ago. So definitely long enough that it feels like we've been doing it for a little while now, but still so much that we're just getting started with as well.
So I've used Buffer on and off. When I'm with a company, I'll get them on Buffer just because it's such a useful way to share. Awesome. And I go back and forth personally about my use of should I buffer out material or should I post to Facebook authentically as myself at all times? And this is a debate I have. It was fun earlier in conversation seeing your excitement for social media, and we'll go into why a social media company, a social media sharing company. But when I want to teach somebody, let's just say my father, right, who is not on any social, what does it mean for a company to be transparent? I send them to you guys. I'm like, no, go look at Buffer's transparency dashboard. Go look at what they're doing with salaries. Go look at how they're managing their employees and how they're owning up to their mistakes. Because it's such a way of describing the challenges and the growth that comes through those challenges that companies are facing in this day and age.
That's amazing, yeah. And I'm very grateful that you kind of use as an example. And we've been pretty blown away by how far that aspect has spread, and we've not necessarily done a whole lot to try and spread it. I mean, just through the value of transparency, we do try and live by that value and share our learnings and failures and things. But it has been amazing. Recently, I spoke with a few professors from Harvard Business School who want to do a case study around us and transparency and the implications there and things, and it's pretty amazing, yeah. So it's been fun to just kind of be experimenting ourselves and then to see that be noticed and then to start to think like, oh, how can we maybe, help others to explore this, and we can learn from that as well, so.
One of the things that you've been telling me about and we've been talking about is the pendulum swings of running an organization. And it reminds me actually of Bob Gower's talk in this room just before. He was tying the personal to the business. And like an organization, a company is made up of the people. And I mean, I have mood swings. Some days are good days, some days are not. How much sleep, how much exercise have I been getting, right? But you've been talking about Buffer as like, we're going on an experiment in this direction, and then we swing back. Maybe we swing back too far. And the level of self-acceptance of mistakes that you've made or of challenges that you've faced is really pretty awe-inspiring to me. So maybe can you choose one challenge that you guys have had and describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have ongoing pendulum swings and so many different things, and I think probably most companies do. And so we've had, is it like fewer focus on product quality or product innovation, getting new features out there, or for us a lot of the time it's also, do we focus on the product and the customer, or do we focus on company culture and trying to innovate and maintain and build on those things as well. And I would say that that kind of company culture versus like product innovation is a key challenge that we've had for a while now. And I think it's really interesting because I think that like as an individual in your life, you go through these different phases and different situations, and at some points you're more focused on one thing than something else, and that's great and it works. And then as a company, I think there's somehow like an expectation that overall as a company, you have this like consistency, and I think there's a lot of things that are set up that kind of encourage that, and so it almost makes it hard to then accept that there are going to be these swings. And I think part of it is also trying to have those swings within the company and in different places and balancing out a little bit, but I think it's still hard. But I think one of the most, I'm not sure who the quote came from, but one of the most inspiring quotes that I heard is that there are no balanced people, there are only balanced teams. And I think we're also starting to now think, oh, there are no balanced teams, only like a balanced company in a way. So it's kind of, how do we structure teams to be focused on some things and other teams focused on other things? But I think regardless of that, you still have these swings that you have to go through. And I think one of the biggest things for us and for me, even like literally today and yesterday, a key thing I've been learning, and I was really inspired by the talk from Gail from Wikimedia yesterday, talking around these swings as well, and really also this idea of kind of the swings being a necessary part of the life cycle of the company. So I think that's a key thing for us, because especially in the first few years and even recently, we've seen these swings as a really bad thing. Oh, we made a mistake, now we have to swing back. But I think realistically, if you take one single point in time, there's no equilibrium as such. You're always off with one thing, and so you've just got to maybe, I think that's what I'm starting to try and embrace, is just this idea of that's going to be a continual cycle, and you naturally swing.
What's an example, or maybe I'll be directive, and can you speak a little bit about the experimentation towards self-management that Buffer went through?
Yeah, so we experimented like all in on self-management for about 9 months, and it was pretty much triggered right exactly at the point where we as a team discovered the book Reinventing Organizations. It was when we kind of were super inspired by that and just went all in. And we learned a ton, but after 9 months, we also realized a lot of mistakes we'd made with that. And then we started to emerge from that. So I think that's another example where we've kind of swung away from it, and now we certainly have managers in the team and things. And so that was just a big challenge. I think one of the key mistakes we made with our self-management experiment was that we saw self-management as kind of like letting go of everything and just trusting that everything's just going to work out. And we realized that actually we didn't have that much structure before, but we had a few people that were managing, leading, mentoring, doing one-on-ones and things, and that was holding things together quite a lot. And we then just let go of that, and it just was quite chaotic, and we were feeling like, oh, we just need to trust it, and it's going to come together and things. But I think we learned through that I personally believe now for self-management to really work, you need to kind of put more structure in order to make that work. And I think that's actually what holacracy is kind of built around, is like a lot of structure, not hierarchy, but structure.
One of the things that I really enjoy about Buffer is in your day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month, the amount of writing that you guys output about the process that you're in the midst of going through. So there's one blog post that is like, okay, we're doing away with managers, we're doing away with structure, and there's this delight in this 50-word essay, 500-word essay about we're going to be a completely flat organization and there's going to be no structure. And then I read what came 8 months later, and it's okay, we screwed up. That did not work. that was way over ambitious. We're going to have to come back to something. And to see those points in time captured really transparently.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there was a point in time where we started to realize that we are having these swings and we are learning things, and we have put something out there pretty strongly, and now we're almost contradicting it. And so at that point, there was like two paths, right? There's, do we stop sharing as much about our learnings, or do we share more and make sure we share when we've had a new realization? And that's the path we've decided to take. And it definitely takes a bit more work. We have to take the time to document things, but that's kind of the path we've chosen, and that feels a lot better to me. And it's nice to be able to still be excited about things that we're currently doing and not feel like, oh, we're gonna, if we're sharing that too strongly, then yeah.
So transparency is one aspect, but and the more time I've spent having conversation with you, I see a willingness to experiment, to go try new things, right? So for example, a completely distributed company, right? Over how many countries?
I think we're about 50 cities on 5 continents.
Okay, so 80 people in 50 cities.
I think it's around that. Yeah.
And maybe speak a little bit about your sort of where you consider home base.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been quite nomadic in the last few years. So I was in San Francisco for a while, for about 2 years. And most recently, in the last year, I've been on and off. Like half my time has been in New York City and half my time has been in Hawaii. So that's been my split for the last year, which has been pretty great.
I also get really jealous every time I look at his Facebook feed, because there's pictures of like, yeah, I was surfing in Hawaii and then I was kayaking in upstate New York, and it's like, this is a week apart.
Yeah, it's fun. And before, so about 6 to 9 months ago, I decided I want to maybe settle a little bit more. But before that, for about a year, I was traveling and at one point, I think I wrote a blog post and I counted the places, and I think it was around about like 13 different cities in the space of like 3-4 months, and that was too much, but it's definitely fun to experiment with that personally for myself and go to that kind of extreme. And there are people in the team that are fairly nomadic, and then there's other people that are fully. I think one of the things that I really like about remote working is that it's great for those people that want to travel, but it's also really great for people that don't necessarily want to travel. And maybe they might have family, or and they can work from home and see their kids more and not have a commute and things like that. So I really think that it has great benefits both ways.
What is it in you and in your co-founder that you guys experiment in the way that you do? So transparency, remote workforce. I mean, there's any number of different aspects of this company and of the things you're willing to try.
Yeah, I've been trying to think what it is. I think a couple of things that I've broken it down to is, I think one of them is our naivety. Neither of us really have truly worked for another company, and I think that has meant that we've not had any basis of norms of things that we feel like we should do necessarily. And then I think it's that coupled with a little bit of experience of some things that we've experienced that we have not felt that great about. So I was at one point part of a company that was a small company, and eventually they made a couple of decisions that didn't work out, and eventually they went bankrupt, and a lot of people in the company weren't paid for months, and then and then eventually it didn't work out at all, but they didn't really know what was going on at that point. So I had that experience that definitely I think had an impact. But then I think it's also been just I think myself and Leo, my co-founder Leo, we're both pretty optimistic. So I think we started to experiment with some things, and it's also been, I think sometimes people look at all the things we do today and see the transparency dashboard. We have like buffer.com/transparency, and it lists all the things we're transparent about. And you can look at that and see like, wow, like that's crazy. But it definitely wasn't an overnight thing. It was very much let's do this and then this and then this. And it was almost like, I've never seen salaries be completely public, or I've never seen people just publish revenue, especially after a certain point and things. And we just tried these things, and we were thinking, well, there must be a really good reason why people haven't done this before. Something crazy is going to happen, and then it didn't. So then we just kept doing a bit more. So
yeah. So salary is transparent, but also, for example, more or less Silicon Valley founded company that has taken VC funds, and you've turned down a lot more funds. Like, you are not Aaron's talk last night about flipping companies, right? I look at Buffer and I'm like, oh no, you're interested in building a company to last.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We started in the UK, and then we came to Silicon Valley. We went through an accelerator program, and then we raised a seed round. But we were already generating some revenue and profitable when we raised our seed round. And so we didn't raise as much as some companies would at that point, because we actually did the calculation of our revenue and our revenue growth and realized we don't need to raise as much. So that luckily meant that we were able to raise still on similar valuation. And so we've always been on this trend of, I think in Silicon Valley there's a lot of times a trend of just purely like burning cash all the time, and then you have a certain runway to the next round of funding. And I think it's a great model. I think
I've seen so many companies go through a race to raise more money. Like they're trying to get to a proof point so that they can get more outside funding.
Yeah, and I think that the model clearly works, and there's probably some things that we are, missing out on by not necessarily going that path, but at the same time it's the path that we've ended up on, and it's been more of a sustainable path, and sustainable, but then also saying, okay, maybe we could benefit at this point from funding, or from the people we can become associated with through that funding. But we've done 2 rounds, and we've generally raised a lot less than we maybe could at the stages we've been at, and I think that's helped us in quite a big way to be able to experiment a lot more, because we've not maybe had as much pressure from that side.
In the nitty-gritty a little bit, managing a completely remote workforce, what are some of the tools or tactics that you use as a company to have company cohesion with people across 50 cities?
Yeah. So the tools we use are Slack, and we use Zoom, which is like a video conferencing tool, a lot, and it's really great. So those are like the 2 key things for us. And then we really try and break things down into small teams that can work together and become very close together, and have like a fairly clear scope of ownership of something. And that's kind of what we really strive for. And then those teams will very regularly be having video calls, doing like a daily stand-up and working together. And I think that's helped us a lot. I think we still have challenges sometimes, and we still think a lot about are people too far apart time zone wise and things like that, and that can be a challenge. But on the whole, I think one of the key things that has helped us to make remote working like really work is that we are 100% remote. I think that is a key thing, because we don't have a team of 5 where 3 or 4 are in the office and 1 person is remote.
I tried to manage an education tech company of 8 people, where the founder was constantly traveling and half of us were remote most of the time and the other half wanted to be in the office, and there was such discontinuity So
Yeah,
that's something that I've taken from your experience at Buffer, and like
yeah.
I will either have a completely remote team or a completely on-site team.
Yeah, that would be probably my key recommendation, and that's something that about 3 years ago, or 3 or so years ago, um, a guy called David Cancel, who is the co-founder and CEO of a few different companies, and then one of them was acquired by HubSpot, and he was the chief product officer at HubSpot for a while, and he said he's done it a few different ways, and that was his key recommendations, like just choose one way or the other, and don't kind of go in the middle there. And I think that's helped us a lot. It can be hard sometimes when a company might ask me, oh, what about if we want to start to move that way? Because that's harder then. But we've been lucky that pretty much from the beginning we've been fully remote, and that's made things a lot easier, I think.
Nice. It's easy to look at Buffer from the outside and be like, oh, you're turning down VC funding, and you've grown to 80 people over 6 years. As founder and CEO, what are the sacrifices that you've made to grow this organization?
Let's also come back to the illusion that we always turning this down, and it's all rainbows and unicorns, because it's like, yeah, there's definitely some struggles. But I think for me, it's interesting to think about the sacrifices I've made, because I think one of the things that I think these 2 days, and generally that I think about a lot, is we talk a lot about balance, and really, and the idea of like bringing your whole self to work, and really having other things going on, and like being able to embrace that, and how that will actually help you as well with your work, and those are all things that I really and at this point we try and bring into the company. But I still think that maybe truly in the early days of the first year, getting the company off the ground, definitely, like, me and my co-founder were just working like crazy, and so it's hard for me to fully imagine that, can you do it like without that? I don't know. Like, I hope that it's possible, but it's not how we did it, even though that some of those things are what we strive for now. So for me, in the early days, definitely personal life and friends and doing those kind of things was definitely a sacrifice that I made. I think it wasn't necessarily something that I felt that I was like, I didn't feel pain of that sacrifice, because it was just a choice I made. And I also moved from the UK to San Francisco, and kind of left behind a lot of that, so there was not as much kind of like, people hitting me up and saying,
Turning people away.
yeah, exactly. So for me, it was very much a choice, and I was excited about this new thing, but it was definitely working a lot of hours. And then I think it was only in hindsight after a few years that I started to look back and realize, oh, like, I've made a lot of progress on, maybe a company, but then on some other things it's not evolved in the way that yeah.
What do you do as CEO uniquely well? Like, what allows you to have built this company and to continue to experiment in the ways that you do?
It's a good question. I'd rather you ask other people that. But I think one of the things that I definitely have heard from my co-founder and from the other leaders in the team is that I'm very reflective. So I ask why a lot, and I question things a lot, and sometimes maybe too far, when we could just like go with something and it would work. But that's definitely something that I like to do a lot, and just really get to the core of something, of like, why are we choosing to do this. And I like to try my best to communicate that. I think as we've grown, I've definitely have challenges in terms of company-wide communication is a challenge that I feel a lot right now, just with how much we've grown and how distributed we are and things. But when I do have a specific thing that I want to communicate, I feel I very much enjoy going all the way to the high level of the why behind it, so that people can fully understand. Like, the goal for me is that I would like people to understand my thought process, like, to the point where, hopefully they have all the information that they would either make the same decision by knowing that context, or they can at least like respect the decision I've made.
I want to open up the questions to everybody. So whether we've covered enough about Buffer, or you're like more curious about some of the basics of the company, or whether you've followed the company for a long time, just to get a sense of what have you guys either always wanted to ask or what do you not understand so far. And if you just shout out a question, I'll repeat it. Yeah, Jenny.
You shared that one of the things that makes remote working successful is entirely distributed. What else helps everybody stay on the same page?
I think one of the key things, which has actually been a challenge for us recently, because some of you may have seen, which is also something we decided to be very transparent about, was we had, we went through a cash flow crisis. We had to, we did some layoffs, and that was really tough. But one of the key cost cuttings we made at that point was to say the next company retreat that we have planned, we're not going to be able to do it. The next company retreat that we had planned, we decided we're not going to be able to afford that because it actually is a large expense for us to fly everyone to somewhere and all get together, because there's no place that's convenient, right? Everyone is fully distributed, so it's just, there's the flight costs alone. So we decided that we're not going to be able to do that, and I think we're definitely feeling the impact of that. So I think as a distributed team, another key thing is like regularly meeting up, and it evolves over time with the company, because when we were smaller, when we were 15, 20 people, we could get together and work together and be very productive. And now it's more about getting together and maybe bonding and getting to know each other, but it's just like takes a different form now. So now we're also feeling that we need to make sure we have a good budget for not only a single company-wide like whole company retreat, but also like mini team retreats regularly as well, maybe a couple of times a year, as well as maybe an annual company-wide retreat as well. So I think that's where that face time is really still important. I think there's benefits of being remote, and I think especially in terms of some of the distractions that you can have at an office and just the different environments that people like to work in. I think I really like that people can choose to work from a co-working space if they like that kind of people around them environment, or they could choose to work from home or wherever might be a really good environment. But I think even with that, like getting together in person, you just get to know each other on a deeper level, and that's something that we can't get around. And I think some of that might change over time with technology getting better and things, but right now it's really still important that we get together in person.
I want to touch on what impact. So how many people got laid off in this financial challenge that you guys had?
So 10 people.
10 people.
And that was 11% of the team.
Okay. And how long ago was that?
I think it's about 3 months now.
Okay.
So yeah, 3 months ago.
A great article published in the moment about that experience, which I definitely recommend people read. One of the cost-cutting measures was to not do the company retreat, and now you're noticing an impact. Mm-hmm. What is that impact, and how did you decide that that impact is worth it?
The impact of
not doing the retreat. You said that the company culture has been impacted.
Well, we really had no choice but to not do it, because it was a cost, one of the key big costs that we would have. So we made that decision. But I think, we are definitely feeling it in terms of just teams really being productive together, and especially we had a company retreat earlier in the year in February, end of January, but there's still quite a number of people that have joined the team after that.
So you've got people who've literally never met in person.
Exactly. We have people in the team that have, in a team of 79 other people, and they've not met any of those 79 people in person.
Right. Got it. And how does that influence company culture today?
I think there's a sense of not feeling the cohesion. Even from, I think we hear from those people that maybe they don't feel as connected to other people in the team. And we also hear from people that have been on quite a number of retreats that they are sensing that that cohesion and that the feeling of like a close-knit group of people has gone away a little bit. And we actually used to do the company retreat. At one point, we did it every 4 months, and so a lot more frequently. And I think that really helped us feel connected, because I think we always would say to people that were going to be going on a retreat, we always would say, how you work together, how you relate to each other in the team. Like before and after the retreat is going to be completely different. You just feel like you know people on a much deeper level.
Yeah. Other folks with questions? Yeah, Damon.
So, you were talking about the firing process, right? It's a very interesting article about some of the things that you guys thought about. My question was about, at some point you have to either look at somebody in person or over video conference and say, at some point it's a one-on-one, head-on thing. It's no fun. I mean, if it were fun, what kind of person would you be?
Yeah.
But the question I had is, how did you try to bring the buffer values to that exact moment?
Nice. So just to repeat the question, in this case where you had to fire 10 people, how did you bring the buffer values to that moment when you're engaging with those people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, when I had some of those conversations myself, and it was really about trying to share fully openly everything that had played a part in this situation, and really being fully admitting that this is some big mistakes that I've made myself to put us in this situation, and apologizing for that very openly to them. I think that's something that we've tried to do differently, and we try to encourage other people that were having those conversations to share that full context as well. And I think that is something that...
So, I mean, playing just a tiny bit of hardball, but you had the opportunity to raise money, right? You've had acquisition offers, you've had much more offer of money than you've taken. You could have raised money instead of firing 10 people. So how did you justify that answer in this video call with an employee?
Yeah, I think so. We decided that we want to take on that responsibility ourselves, and we want to have a healthy, sustainable company. And so that was a decision we made, and I think that is a decision that we've made prior to that point. It's not we've never raised before when we've needed to raise and when we've been running out of cash. So that's just not a way that we've done things. It was really just to say to those people that we got kind of over enthusiastic about hiring, and we grew the team too fast.
It's actually really sweet, especially knowing the context, because this is, again, an example of the article that talks about we've seen epic growth, right? I think it's you had 74 people at a retreat one year, 74 people at a retreat the next year, and then you doubled in size.
Oh.
Or do I have my numbers wrong? 30 people?
Yeah, 30 people, and then, we had 30 people, and then we had 70 people in the next one.
Right.
Which was less than a year. So,
and so double in size, and then the acknowledgement that no, we screwed it up and we're having to make these layoffs.
Yeah, and it was really wanting to face that reality of that we messed up, and we don't want to necessarily raise money to get through that when we want to actually face that mistake head on and solve that, and then be stronger as a result of that and move on. But I think a large part of it was also having honest conversations with those people and sharing that, but also staying in touch with those people, doing our best to help those people. I think one of the most amazing things from the article that we wrote, laying out the mistakes that we made and what we were deciding to do, and our methodology for how we picked the 10 people and all of those things. We tried to lay all that out and be fully transparent, and we found that there's so much warmth and help from the community, and a lot of companies coming forth saying are these 10 people these 10 people looking for work now?
Nice.
We have openings, and so that was amazing. And we were able to stay in touch with those people and help some of them. We helped to get to the next thing. And I think that's the key thing, is that I do strive for leaving things in a good state where there's full understanding as much as possible. It's not always possible, but I think it's just something to really strive for. It's personally something I believe in.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. What's your name? Rick.
Hi.
Rick.
Yeah, I really respect the visibility and transparency, right? But
Thanks.
did it ever cross your mind to be worried about backlash, litigation, or something like that?
So the question is backlash and litigation in response to your transparency at Buffer.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We had definitely we've been communicating a lot with our lawyers and discussing what are the some of the risks that we put ourselves in with this. And it's hard because we're kind of pushing a boundary that don't have many examples out there of. So we're trying to do that, but we're also trying to be responsible. And we also know that we don't have experience in that either. We don't have, I don't have a background of, HR and the laws there and things. So it's something where we really try and balance that and get all the information we can, and then make the decisions that we choose to make around that. But we ran the blog post that we published. We ran that by them and kind of got sign off from them on that and made some adjustments and things. And some of it was a bit of a challenge of like, oh, maybe we need to take some things away, but we pushed a lot on transparency in general. So I think it's just a constant balance. I think that there's some aspects that I would love to go further on in terms of like the contract that someone receives when they start working with us, and the language there and the IP and some of those things. And some of it's really challenging because we would like to let people have full ownership of things that they work on outside of work. But then if we want to be prepared for being able to fundraise, that's just like part of due diligence. And so there's just generally a lot of challenges there. But I think on the whole, we do see transparency as like such an important core value and principle that we keep that at the forefront. And part of it as well is like how we hire. So it's the value of transparency combined with all the other values we have as well, which we really try and hire for those values. And things like empathy and gratitude really coming through and really validating, knowing that those things come through and that's how we hire. Then we feel like we generally, and then we're so open with everyone. So we feel like, I genuinely think that the risk is reduced, but there's still that risk that we get informed of. So that's why in some ways we decide to still go ahead in a sense and say that the risk is reduced, so it still makes sense to go ahead. And if something comes up, then we'll try and handle that as best we can.
Other questions? Dory.
So you've experimented with self-management and with transparency, and I'm wondering if there's something next that you're hoping for in Buffer's culture, like something you'd really like to grow as part of the company.
Yeah.
Question is, next experiments after transparency, after remote work, what are the areas that you're still excited and haven't yet explored?
Yeah, I think, one of the big challenges that we're working through right now, it's interesting you kind of said, have people offering us money and things, and it's not totally true, because I think that some of I mentioned that pendulum swing before of like culture and focus on product and growth, and I think there's an element of like, we want to fully experiment and do more, but then we also want to, grow and have a great product for customers. And I think one of the things we're finding is that as we try and, manage those two aspects, we may be actually setting ourselves up for not being able to fundraise, because our growth rate might slow to a point where we're not actually that attractive. But it might be that, we choose to do that because that's what we want to focus on, culture and sustainability. So it's early to say, but potentially one of the big experiments for us might be around, exploring the idea of more ownership by the team and the company, and maybe profit sharing and dividends and things like that, potentially as a way for us to go a bit more all in on the culture focus and things. But it's a constant balance, and we're talking with our investors and how do they feel about that and things like that. And so it's hard for us to say. I don't know if we'll fully go all the way one way, or maybe we'll find a middle ground. I'm personally very excited about finding those middle grounds and saying, are there new ways of raising funding where you don't necessarily promise? I think a lot of the funds are set up so that, there's one or two breakout successes, and it doesn't matter how the other ones do, but we don't necessarily want to, take funding from those types of funds that then forces into that full-on growth path, because we want to also focus on the culture side and things. So that's kind of like that pendulum swing there. So that's like a general challenge, but also maybe something that we would like to explore and innovate. And personally, I'm thinking about, can we raise funding from like an AngelList syndicate where we lay out fully the criteria? And so that's something that I would love to. I think sometimes in these kind of groups, it's like all, don't raise funding because then you end up on this path. But I would love to explore the idea of, can we raise and really set down the terms ourselves and still make that, there's still value creation over time, and that could still be interesting. And maybe it comes, the return is from dividends maybe instead of from a big exit. And, so it's kind of this idea of like maybe we don't exit at some point. But so, anyway, I don't know if that really fully answers, but it's definitely some of the things on our mind right now.
One more question. Yes.
When you first swung the pendulum towards self-management using reinventing organizations, were there specific practices that proved particularly challenging, or was it the general impact, cumulative impact of everything you've been doing under the rubric of self-management that caused you to swing the pendulum the other way?
So if I can, the question is, what were the particular challenges in implementing the self-management?
Yeah. It's a really great question. Yeah. So, like, was it specific challenges, or was it like a culmination of different things? I would say it's probably a bit of a combination. There was definitely specific things that we found, decision-making, ownership, and people maybe taking leadership, I think, was a key challenge that we saw. So we kind of deliberately took away leadership in terms of, I kind of see it as our interpretation of self-management, which now in hindsight I would say maybe was a little bit wrong, because I don't think it's necessarily not having leadership, but we took it away in terms of like taking away managers so that we could have this flatter, this like self-managed system. And so, but we definitely saw that lack of people maybe stepping up and leading, which then, and I think so a lot of decisions that should have been made by someone feeling it and and going ahead and saying, oh, we should do this. And a key example is that we, from the start of that time, it was a 9-month period, and from the start to the end, the team didn't grow at all. And part of that was us saying, okay, individual teams should hire themselves if they feel that need to hire. And so that was just one example of something that didn't happen. And that's why then myself and my co-founder, like, we chatted, and a few of us felt like, oh, we feel like we should be growing because the revenues have continued to grow, the customer base has continued to grow. We feel like we can't actually serve the customers as well as we would like to now. That's partially why we stepped in. But then that caused the other pendulum swing because we stepped in and grew too much. So it's just like a constant thing. But I'd say, yeah, there's a few specific things, but also just a general culmination where, like, after 9 months, we started to reflect and say, oh, like, and I think another key thing was that people, we had this idea of like people want that freedom, and they, know the things that they would like to do. But I think part of what we lost as well was that guidance, but also like accountability and just like knowing how you're doing. And that's like another thing that I think was a specific thing that we found, that people do want to know how they're doing and have that guidance. And so, yeah.
All right, so we are at time. Thank you. I
Yeah,
have
thanks so
personally
much,
learned
Robin, and
so
thanks,
much
everyone.
from Buffer and from your experience. Where can people go to learn more? Where can they learn about you and learn about Buffer and follow your journey?
Yeah, buffer.com/transparency is probably one of the best places to go for a lot of the topics we've been talking about. Also, open.buffer.com is a really good place as well. So we have a blog that's dedicated to the transparency and openness. And then for me, that's my Twitter. That's probably a good place to go.
At Joel Gascoigne
Yeah.
on Twitter.
Or joel.is is my personal website, so it might be a bit easier.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.